Thank you so much. And good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see you all again and to be part of this program. And I'm glad I also caught the part of the last speaker. I didn't hear all of that presentation. The task that I've been given for today is really twofold. To talk about handling conflicts of interest around government-funded research, and to talk about how to best promote successful public-private partnerships in the food and agricultural research domain. These two topics, I think, really go hand in hand, and the goal of creating successful partnerships requires that we address this really important public concern around conflicts of interest. If we're to answer the mission of this organization, ILSI, as well as the government-funded USDA, in my case, public-private partnerships. So while our area of interest from the science perspective are the food and the agricultural disciplines, we certainly share a joint goal with ILSI in promoting public health. And it frequently, I think, is not understood that we within the agricultural science area really do look at our research programs as being the evidence base for what we view as being the first line of public health. Provision of an adequate food supply, a safe food supply, and a food supply that will support lifelong good health. So we really feel as well that there's no time to waste in that research agenda, and that there are many, many benefits that are going to come from working in partnerships with universities as well as with private companies. As the previous speaker was discussing, we are in really a new age of disclosure as it relates to this era of transparency. And we've all become accustomed to going to scientific meetings where the first slide that comes up is a list of your personal financial holdings that may be related to the topic under concern. So I don't have any affiliations or funding sources at this point other than the appropriations that come to us that we disperse to investigators around the country related to this topic today. But I did want to bring to your attention that there are new requirements with respect to disclosure, divestiture, and recusals under which the officials in the US government and in the research agencies are operating. The Office of Government Ethics now posts publicly for those of us who are political appointees our annual financial disclosure reports. So these are all of the financial holdings of the employee, the employee's spouse, and the employee's children. So these are now publicly available on the internet, the annual financial disclosure forms. We have in place mechanisms where when you're going into a job, if you do have a financial holding in a stock or perhaps a business, that you must divest yourself of that prior to going into the job. And we also have in place a requirement for recusals. If you cannot divest yourself of that investment, and an issue comes before you in which there is a conflict of interest, you must recuse yourself of anything to do with that particular topic. And this comes into play again with family members and their employment. And those types of recusals are in place in advance and are made known to all of the staff who are surrounding you to make sure that any items that might pose a conflict of interest do not come to your desk. The third point that I thought might be a news to this audience is that as of this year, Congress enacted a new law called the Stock Act that primarily puts into place new requirements for members of Congress with respect to their financial holdings and the kinds of decisions that they make as members of Congress. But it also contains a provision that affects federal employees and requires that the political appointees, what are called Schedule Cs, as well as senior executive service members, publicly file reports on any transactions of stock, bonds, and some securities above $1,000, and that information must be filed within 30 to 45 days of any transaction. And all of that information also goes on a publicly accessible website. So we are in a new era of transparency in the federal government with respect to these. And I just dropped my prop. If you all came into town yesterday and picked up the Washington Post, there was an article in there about federal scientists, researchers rebel against the Stock Act. So I give you a little bit of context for yesterday's news. From the agricultural science perspective, though, partnerships with the public sector organizations like universities, as well as with private companies, have been frequently used to help to advance areas in which we have mutual interests. And clearly from USDA's perspective, we're very much interested in rural development, we're very much interested in the farm economy, and over the years we have evolved ways of working that are focused on improving profitability and productivity in the farm sector, working to develop new companies in rural areas. And there's a series of principles that undergird this work, giving everybody a fair opportunity, laying a level playing field, being responsible partners. But ultimately, the underlying principle in all of this work is that there is some public good that is the result of the research and the partnerships. So we really view that these criteria are also a foundation of how new public-private partnerships should be undertaken. A bit of history to start with, whether it's universities or private sector entities, we view from our research program perspective that working with them is not news. I mean, it's the way that our research programs have worked from the beginning. With the passage of the Bayh-Dole Act in 1980, and then with the 1986 Federal Technology Transfer Act, university and government scientists could patent their federally funded research, and it was actually very actively encouraged. We've evolved over the years, though, a lot of different mechanisms of working in these types of partnerships, and that this slide illustrates some of them. We partner with research entities using, as I point out, a variety of different models. We strive to be a model partner in the federal government for our partnership and technology transfer activities. And we also look very much to new ways of working that are being implemented in other departments, and also we're very actively watching partnerships between universities and public companies to see how those new partnerships are being established. Part of the success that we've had over the years in these partnerships is having these formal mechanisms to facilitate public-private partnerships. They range from cooperative research and development awards, or CRADAs, patent licensing agreements that convey rights to develop and commercialize innovations from USDA research, a variety of other cooperative research and material transfer instruments, And a new innovation is our enhanced use lease authority that allows long-term relationships for up to 30 years with private sector firms that build a research facility behind the gates on a USDA research laboratory grounds. This authority allows private sector entities to actually lease a building at a publicly owned facility instead of having to work outside the gates. And it streamlines the research process. It also helps to build what are long-term relationships. And the science-based innovations that result from the intramural programs of research through public-private partnerships do create new technologies, new opportunities, new processes, products, and services that have an ultimate benefit overall to the nation. They do this by increasing productivity, increasing efficiency, keeping costs low, enhancing global competitiveness for the U.S. agricultural sector. So technology transfer functions are critical to accelerating the utility of public R&D investments, creating economic activity and job creation and sustainable economic development. And I thought it would be worthwhile to just share with you some of the current information that we have to give you a sense of what the extent of the use of these different types of partnership agreements are. With respect to cooperative research and development awards, this and the subsequent slides are taken from the annual reporting that the Agricultural Research Service does. And as you can see here, in this most recent reporting year, 2011, there were 275 active CRADA relationships valued at about $160 million over the lifetime of the CRADAs, which can extend for a length of up to 5 years. This past year also, there were 78 new CRADAs that were executed, which was a little bit down from the prior year. And ARS continues to put a priority on the development of this type of working agreement because it helps to offset what are some declines in the appropriations to the agency. But at the same time, they really do prove valuable to the private sector because they result in the actual commercialization of products. The CRADAs by type are shown here. About 55% of the active CRADAs are with small businesses. Again, part of our focus is on trying to develop business in rural areas. So 55% in the portfolio we think is pretty good. With the need to position the agricultural sector to be globally competitive and to partner with other agencies with complementary research, we're now seeing an increase in multiple partner CRADAs, currently running at about 10% of the portfolio. And 2/3 include private sector partners from out of the state in which the research laboratory is located, kind of giving an indicator of the national scope of the research that's being done. USDA also uses a range of mechanisms to transfer technology to businesses, as seen here. Most of the number of awards or of agreements are in the material transfer agreements, but CRADAs represent, let's see, on that slide about 5%, and cooperative agreements 20% of the overall number of transfer agreements. These types of agreements cover a very wide spectrum of research opportunities, from natural resources conservation through pathogen detection in plants, animals, water, and foods, enhanced genetic trait analyses in cattle and other livestock, as well as in biofuels development. And I think this kind of interweaving of our work with partners demonstrates that we're actively engaged as part of technology transfer in applying for patents. And over this same time period, you can see that we've been very active in filing applications and also in actually receiving patents on those files. So over the last several years, there have been between 100 and 120 patents per year applied for, and between 20 and 50 issued each year. We have 8 registered in-house patent agents with the success rates that range from 95 to 98%. We also recognize that when you think about the continuum of research, from the basic through proof of concept, applied research, into the applied prototype development range, and through to the scale up and commercialization, that there are actually opportunities for the support of pre-competitive research at every level of this type of research. And again, looking across the portfolio of work that we are supporting, we can, and in which we have agreements with either universities or with companies for the conduct of research, we can find examples at every one of these levels. So our focus when we're developing these agreements is on public goods research and research that's in this area that we consider to be pre-competitive. But the takeaway message for you is that there are opportunities at every level of research. It's not just in the fundamental area. And a central principle for us for entering into multi-participant public-private partnerships is that research fall into this area that we call pre-competitive. A good example of this process is that in the biofuels area, it can cost literally hundreds of millions of dollars to get a technology to full scale where it can be used broadly across an industry, but no one has the money to go from all the way from the very basic research to the fully scaled up commercialization. And this valley of death example occurs at every level in the biofuels area's development, from the fundamental research through the scale up to commercialization. We've been looking with interest at different types of research agreements and have been looking closely as well at the different new foundations that have been established. Now, ILSI, I think, is a really good example of a public-private partnership. And the ILSI Foundation is probably now among some of the older of the foundations that are actively encouraging this type of collaborative work. So with the 30 years that ILSI has been in existence, 30 plus years, it's really been a pioneer in establishing ways of working. And it does provide opportunities to accept funding from corporations, foundations, and government, operates with transparency and attention to declarations of interest, and has, through the Foundation Board of Trustees, a governing body. We've been looking closely as well at other federal agencies and new foundations that have been set up to facilitate their work. There are a number of them now, but the Foundation for the National Institutes of Health in some ways works in a similar manner. Its mission is to create innovative public-private biomedical partnerships that complement NIH priorities and advance public health. They do that through partnerships with corporations, foundations, academia, federal agencies, and philanthropists. They navigate the waters of grants management, contracts, and fundraising while overseeing as well as conducting research. And the foundation serves as a neutral forum for partners to collaborate and make sure that the partners' voices are heard. And they've evolved two major models for partnerships. In the first one, raising funds from private donors and partners to expand ongoing NIH activities. And in the second, developing or supporting activities that take advantage of NIH expertise, but are not led by NIH. We've recently had the opportunity working with a number of development organizations across the country to develop a new foundation for the express purposes of commercializing research from the Agricultural Research Service laboratories. It's called the Agricultural Technology Innovation Partnership Network Foundation, or ATIP Foundation. And it's positioning itself to expand its efforts to work with all of the USDA science agencies. The map illustrates the nationwide coalition of partners that ARS has in this foundation, from CalEd in California to TEDCO on the East Coast and others across the nation. And these represent 9 economic developed entities across the US. The foundation is really going to be focusing on 7 key metrics: expediting transfer of USDA innovation to the commercial sector, increasing the use of ag technologies that help emerging markets seeking funding for research, training, and product development, helping the private sector use research that comes out of the USDA in ways that support our mission, creating sustainable communities, hosting regional events, and helping to create the next generation of skilled workers. Lastly, I said that we've been also interested in what's happening on university campuses. And just last week, I had the opportunity to visit with Dr. Bob Easter, the new president at the University of Illinois, and he shared with me information about this new public-private partnership between the University of Illinois and Abbott Labs, the purpose of which is to conduct research on the impacts of nutrition on human brain function and cognition. And they're using a very, to me, innovative way of competitively awarding the funds on the university campus. So this was another new model emerging on a university campus. This grand challenge has actually helped to fund the establishment of a center at the University of Illinois, and I think that there probably is going to be some really interesting research that will be coming forward as a result of it. So these are experiments, I believe, with new types of public-private partnerships, and I think these kinds of experiments are very necessary. The very nature of the trends that we're facing in science and the way that science is being done calls for more partnering and collaboration. And certainly meeting our public responsibilities requires adherence to the principle of ethical clarity and honesty in our public-private partnerships. The real challenge comes from the very heart of this problem. How can we attract the best and the brightest scientific minds to work on the most pressing issues of our time, which I do believe are related to the food supply and the future of the food supply, if their hands are tied through suspicions of conflicts of interest? We certainly have huge questions that are coming from the public about the correct role for government and university to interact with the private sector. And everyone's antennae are up whenever, and this term, conflict of interest, is raised. And as we've heard from the previous speaker, this is also contributing to some of the erosion in public trust in research as the basis for our public policies. So I put here 4 takeaway messages for my message today. The first is that I want you all to know that the United States government is very much an active promoter of public-private partnerships for the purposes of conducting research and also for technology transfer. And we see those 2 things as being very much interdependent. And we also are continuing to evolve new ways in which we conduct these public-private research partnerships. The second takeaway message is that the US government has some very well-developed requirements for managing employee conflict of interest. And I've mentioned those: public disclosure of financial investment, divestiture of holdings that are viewed as presenting a conflict of interest, and recusals from decisions where divestiture is not possible. Again, that's usually a situation where a spouse's employment might raise a conflict of interest for an official in a decision-making situation. The third takeaway is that transparency in the public-private partnerships that we have is very important, and in fact, it's required. We do annual reporting on the public-private partnerships that we have underway. And lastly, I just wanted to reinforce that there is one undergirding principle, and that is, from our perspective in our food and agricultural research, that has been inherent in the way that we have approached public-private partnerships from the beginning. And that principle is to promote the public good, that there is something that the public will benefit from by undertaking this collaborative research and in doing the technology transfer from our laboratories into the companies that are going to develop those products. So I thank you very much for your time and attention today. I thank you for the invitation to be part of your program, and can answer a few questions, I think.
Okay, thank you.